Number 10, the Virtual Boy. This one's just crazy. I doubt many people would remember this, and in Nintendo's defense, they usually know what they're doing. Well, most of the time. Usually. There's so many remasters that they could do. It's a license to print money. I don't know why they don't. Come on, Nintendo, I'm waiting for it. The Virtual Boy, however, oh boy. I wouldn't expect many to have seen it since the sales were poor. The Virtual Boy was a 32-bit portable console that was basically a headset, except, you know, there's no straps to put it around your head, but a stand so you can play games on it while laying prone? Yeah, I'm not sure. My back hurts just looking at it. Doesn't make a lot of sense. The main selling point was the graphics. It was a big topic back in the 90s. The Virtual Boy was capable of 3D, which was huge for the time. Way ahead of its time. Except it was stereographic 3D and monochrome red. Everything was just shades of red. So watching footage of the gameplay gives me a headache, as I'm sure playing it would. So I can see why laying on your living room floor playing this, well, it sucks. Number 9, the Smell-O-Vision. Oh, this is bad. We've come a long way since the dawn of filmmaking. Imagine all of your movies costing 5 cents and all in black and white with no sound. Ooh, what a time to be alive. Today, obviously, we have color, sound, virtual reality, and those moving boxes of the movies, which honestly I'm not crazy about. They shake too much. I'm not a big fan. Same with the 3D. Those glasses that we used to wear, we don't really do the 3D anymore. It was bad. Anyway, some people think that's not enough. Some people want more. Enter the Smell-O-Vision, created by a man named Hans Lube. I mean, that's just that just writes itself, doesn't it? The idea is that while you are watching a movie, you can smell the smells on screen. A field of grass, a car chase with burning rubber, a breakfast scene. My issue is what happens if I leave the Smell-O-Vision on and I fall asleep on the couch and reruns of Dirty Jobs comes on? Ooh, yucky. Or better yet, you guys have a Smell-O-Vision and you're watching my bloopers. Uh-oh, stinky. That wouldn't be very good, would it? Number 8, the black powder mousetrap. Mice. They're everywhere, and they suck. At least the wild ones. Some people got cute pets. So we place mouse traps to get rid of them. However, sometimes we get our fingers cut, which also sucks. Oh man, it hurts really bad. Or if you're a friend of Johnny Knoxville, it hurts all over. They do a lot of weird stuff with mouse traps. Love those guys. However, one design of mousetrap I think is the worst because it could potentially end your life is the black powder mousetrap. It was essentially just like ye olde cannons of the time. Black powder, big iron ball, except just on a much tinier scale. And in the house, because, you know, having a cannon go off in the house is a great idea. Sure, let's just have that. That makes a lot of sense, yeah. Number 7, the baby cage. Living in large cities can be difficult. Toronto being the 3rd largest in North America, well, I can relate. It's crazy we're that big. Things get busy even in the suburbs here. There's a hustle and a bustle that small cities and towns just don't get. Now, back in the early 20th century, this was still the case, except there wasn't the same emphasis on park life, biking, and enjoying what fresh air actually is in the city like there is in modern cities today. We've done better since then. And there's nothing more important than fresh air for babies. So that's why in the 1920s, the baby cage was invented. Basically, it was a wire cage that hangs out of your 5th floor apartment window, like that massive AC unit that hasn't worked properly since McDonald's ran out of Szechuan sauce. Obviously, I don't need to tell you why this is a bad idea, and not too long after, it was outlawed. It's just don't, that's high up, it could drop, yeah, no, bad idea, not a good idea. Number 6, this one's for the older crowd, the Ford Pinto. Remember those bad boys? I never had the pleasure of being in one or owning one myself, but I swear to God, every time my family got together, the men would sit around and talk about cars that they own. It's kind of a man thing to do, I guess, even though they all had the same conversation the last time, which is just like only a couple months ago. And one model that always comes up is the Ford Pinto. Today, cars get recalled all the time, but in the age of affordable family vehicles and quality, the Ford Pinto stood out, especially because there was a chance the Pinto could burst into flames, which is arguably the worst thing a car could do. Besides not work. I'd argue not working is better than bursting into flames. A few other major issues really set back what I think is a very sleek and appealing vehicle to both mom and dad and the family. Number 5, the spaghetti fork. Ma, make sure you put my special spaghetti fork on the table. I need to eat my pasta and gabagool. Italians and lovers of the best cuisine on earth, in my opinion, I love Italian cuisine, get ready to cringe. The twirling spaghetti fork is a battery operated fork that twirls when you push a button, so you no longer suffer the burden of twirling your own spaghetti. Listen, I'm a big dude, I'm lazy, I love staying in after a long week of work and playing video games. Probably my favorite thing to do. Yeah, sometimes I order in because I don't feel like getting up, but not twirling mom's spaghetti? Come on, twirling the spaghetti, I argue that's the best part. No dinner with no should require AA batteries in my opinion, I'm just saying. You bring a fork, why you bring us a fork? Number 4, hydrogen blimps. It really must have been something to witness humans gaining flight. Something so previously impossible was now not only possible, but something that you had to pay money for, which is how you know it was very successful. Large jumbo jets full of croc-wearing tours headed to Slav attractions was still a thing of the future. We're not there yet. This is still the early 1900s. We'll get there. So how do we get people to places in large numbers and still manage to be opulent? Said a bunch of people in the early 1900s. Airships, said Germany, who took the blimp game to the next level. However, a lot of these blimps made a cut in their design, if you will. To help save on money, the airships were filled with the much more cheaper hydrogen, which in large quantities is extremely volatile. The Hindenburg is a great example. Well, we could fill it with a safe fuel, but it's really expensive, but we could fill it with the fuel that could destroy the whole thing, and that's like 10 times cheaper. Well, fill it with that then, why would you not? Number 3, flying car. Maybe it's because we love the idea of breaking new ground, setting precedents, or we really just want to live with the Jetsons. It was a cool cartoon. The Mizar flying car was designed by a group of engineers in the early 1970s, using the very famous Ford Pinto, like previously mentioned, because, well, it sucks on the ground, so it's gotta be good in the sky, right? Right, that makes sense. Well, no. Besides the mechanical issues, it would be a hard sell as, well, you know, the average American doesn't have flying experience, or not to mention a runway in their backyard. Plus, we have trouble with drones today. Imagine if it was raining Ford Pintos. Yikes. Mom, there's another Ford Pinto in the living room! It wouldn't go very well, would it? No. Number 2, the pet rock. This one's so stupid. It's just a rock. Legit, that's all it is. A fad about buying a rock and naming it. Oftentimes including those little googly eyes to make you believe it's alive, because yeah, okay. It's a ridiculous invention, it has no use. However, what it actually is a lesson in great marketing. Something weird enough that can be marketed quite easily, sold at an affordable price, and something that is already familiar with the people everywhere. So it actually makes sense, even if it is a bad invention. And number 1, this one, it's just so true, the Segway. About 15 years ago, these bad boys were all the rage. Basically, it's an electric scooter on 2 wheels with a handle to lean forward and lean back, or perhaps reverse. While there was some success in malls and airports, there wasn't that many in public. The main reason? Well, it's no different than a scooter or a bike, really, and well, it kind of feels like an attempt to reinvent the wheel when we don't need it. Also, in 2022, how many people do you know that have a Segway? Seriously. And if someone pulled up in a Segway to your hangout, it'd be kind of weird, wouldn't it? Yeah, it would. Yeah, it would be weird.
Starting our list off at number 10, the wall climber. Any fans of Spider-Man out there? I've been bouldering lately, and let me tell you, the wall climber could really help my game. The wall climber ideally would do just that. Let the user climb any building without the need of a pulley system. Now this gecko-inspired invention may happen. It may just allow humans to climb any glass building. Finally, just the thing we need, right? All those sicknesses, we're like, nah, I want to Mission Impossible some buildings. I think that's more important here. Geckos can scale a wall, no problem. They're impressive, they're cute little guys. They have these plump little toes covered in microscopic bristles. Now these bristles are called setae. They allow for these licky dudes to stay on the wall all day long. Although we know the science behind them, anything we try and test on it is far too heavy. Now this new wall climber device, however, it spreads the user's weight out evenly throughout the 24 tiles that make up each plate. It feels like a moving ladder, apparently. It's not too scary to use, although I would never in my life ever touch this thing. Terrified of heights. That would trip me out. I can't even rock climb without shaking right now, let alone scale a building with gecko gloves. No thank you. Could you do this? I don't know. I've seen Mission Impossible movies and I'm like, I could do that. I could never do that. Number 9, the running jetpack. Are you looking to shave exactly 20 seconds off of your mile time? Well, I have the odd thing for you. Are you also okay with wearing a jetpack the entire time you're running? Perfect. This technology was originally developed as part of DARPA's program. Now they originally wanted to make soldiers on the ground run faster, which is probably pretty intimidating with Captain America coming at you. But when that didn't plan out exactly like they hoped, they scaled back to improve performance in athletes. Now Jason Crestes, a graduate student of engineering and robotics who leads the project over at Arizona State University, they believe that this is the future of where the jetpack is going. And it looks so funny. People running this fast always looks funny. I don't know. They can now shave off 20 seconds of your mile time. Running downhill already looks so silly. I can't imagine this thing added to it. Check it out. Number 8, underwater breathing. Every time I'm watching a movie and the main character is underwater, I have to participate. I have to also hold my breath as well. You know, you're not alone, Tom Cruise. I'm also underwater with you right now. Let's do this. Let's get out of here. We've all wanted an underwater breathing apparatus at some point. We've seen it in Spy Kids or Star Wars. We grew up thinking, hoping that this was gonna happen. And maybe we're finally here. We're close, at least. Triton claimed that their artificial gills could let us breathe underwater for 45 minutes straight. The deepest you could go right now is around 15 feet, which, I mean, all things considered, not bad. This product was set to launch in 2016, but they had to refund its users, so it didn't work, but we're close. We're pretty close. Number 7, portable record player. Remember when iPods came out and it was like a big deal? Of course, 1,000 songs in your pocket, that's like witchcraft, right? That changed the game. I mean, even now, Spotify, it's getting better and better. Portable record players back then? Not so much. Not really the best invention, I don't think. Like I said, some of these suck. 8 songs in your pocket and they're all gonna scratch and get messed up. Back in the 80s, right before cassette players and Walkmans hit the street, this was the only way to listen to music on the go. So at one point in time, you had to use this and it looked so silly. That's why I had to include this. I don't think records are meant to be on your persons with headphones and like, what are you, Mozart? But a portable record player is not a good idea in any decade. In order to enjoy Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, you had to remain completely still even though you were outside, so. It wasn't really portable. It was just, you had to stay still. That would suck. How do you dance with that? You're like, ooh, I really want to move, but I can't, or else I'll ruin the party. Number 6, radiated toys. Yeah, don't put this one on your wish list next year. The Gilbert U-238 Atomic Energy Lab Set. Here we go. It sure looks like fun, doesn't it, upon first glance? Is that or an Xbox? What's it gonna be? But when the company released this kit back in 1950, it was all but games. Now Gilbert, the Gilbert, who was a successful toy maker at the time, even a businessman, even a magician, he believed that his line of work should be fun yet informative, right? Kind of like Bill Nye. He's fun. He'll swear every now and then. He'll mix it up, make it aggressive for no reason. He was nicknamed the man who saved Christmas right after he convinced the US Council of National Defense to not ban toy purchases during World War I around the holiday season. So, man who saved Christmas, for sure. He's like, please continue selling during this war. I really would like that if we kept selling things and I made money. Thank you. Christmas, the Lord giving. Great. This set also wasn't cheap. It was around $50, which back in the day was more than $50 now. The price was justified as the set was actually radioactive. That's right, the Gilbert U-238 Atomic Energy Lab contained a cloud chamber where you could actually see real alpha particles traveling at 12,000 miles a second. Yeah, how fun is that? You ask for a light bright, mom gives you this, you're like, guess I'm moving out. Number 5, Neanderthal spears and arrows. Okay, we'll get into the more important stuff, the things that stuck around. Sure. Perhaps one of the most vital inventions of all time, one we for sure still use today. Arrows and or spears, they were a necessity when it came to hunting back then. For people in the Stone Age, all they needed was wood, really. Then they'll just do the rest. So impressive. So what they would do is they would carve a leaf shape or a triangle at the tip of this wood, and they were used mainly by riders or barefoot hunters. But when it came to hunting, well, you didn't want to get too close to your prey or else, you know, the wrong team would be claiming victory and eating the other for lunch. So their solution here was to throw these spears or make really tiny ones. Yeah, you can either javelin something really hard or hang back a bit and shoot some arrows into some animals' knees. The latter is a bit more safe. The oldest bows in history are from 9000 BC. They're the home guard bows and they're found in Northern Europe all the way from the Mesolithic period. The oldest spears, however, they come from Germany about 400,000 years ago. They're actually the oldest wooden artifacts in history. Ever. Yeah, imagine being the first person to make a spear. Forget iPhones or iPods. A spear? Humanity. Look at this. I made it. Number 4, penicillin. Also a pretty good invention, I'll admit. This one's pretty great. Sometimes miracles happen when nobody is looking. Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin back in 1928. But at the time, he was actually studying Staphylococcus bacteria that causes infections and boils. But right before Alexander left for a 2-week vacation, he left a petri dish with some of that Staphylococcus on the table, rather than stored away in an incubator like he should have. Now, during this time off, a Penicillium mold spore just drifted in there through a window or the lab stairwell. Some Horton Here's a Who type commute, whatever, got in the room somehow, some way, and the temperature of the room and the lack of one Alexander Fleming allowed for the mold to settle, fight back, and prevent that bacteria from growing furthermore. He discovered when he got back this antibacterial substance was only produced by strains of Penicillium. and now we're a little safer because of it, I'd say. Yeah, he did some good stuff. Number 3, earthquake machine. Nikola Tesla. The man, he knew a thing or two about electricity, and legend has it, he made a steam-powered machine that could cause small earthquakes. Yeah, you thought I was gonna say machine where it could sense them. No, he made one that could cause them. A little bit of a villain move, I'd say. Science. Also, I guess that's science too. Tesla's electromechanical oscillator, or earthquake machine as I call it. It's a little more cool. Legend has it he actually did cause a real earthquake back in 1898 in New York. That's an Avengers level threat right there. Can anyone stop this man? It's Nikola Tesla. Do we stop him? Do we let him go? I don't even know at this point. Tesla told this at his 79th birthday party, according to his biographer. And there's no science that supports these claims, but they're quite fun to share. Apparently, he had a machine that made you, out of your, in your pants. There was a machine that made you, and then you, and then you had to clean up some stuff. The vibrations on this machine was basically a massive taser, and it caused your muscles to clench up. So in other words, you had to change your pants if you use this one. He's a villain. This guy's a villain now that I'm saying this out loud. Number 2, Neanderthal flutes. Yes, music. Where did music come from, right? Music's been in the air for quite a long time, and Neanderthals enjoyed a flute every now and then, it seems. They weren't playing We Three Kings, but they were making music, or some sort of sounds, as early as 50,000 years ago. The first instrument known to man was most likely our vocal cords, but the second one were the flutes of Gist-and-Clouster Cave. They're the oldest musical instruments that have ever been discovered. They were made from bird bone and the ivory of a mammoth, so if that's any indication of how old they are, they made music out of mammoth ivory. Mammoth, the thing that's extinct, and I still can't even sing. Look at that. And finally, number 1, Neanderthal glass. Perhaps the most impressive. This has been on my mind for a while. Imagine making glass for the first time. You would have thought that you were a wizard. I watch glass blowing shows now, and I think that they're wizards. It looks like wizardry. It's crazy. The guy that blows the air into it, they gotta have the spotlight on him more. He's doing some crazy work back there. Glass that was naturally occurring, like obsidian for example, that was around and used during the Stone Age. But man-made glass was first used around 6,000 years ago. Archaeologists are pinning Lebanon, North Syria, ancient Egypt, all as the birthplace of synthetic glass. Now the first use of man-made glass were beads. How hilarious is that? Imagine being the first person to rock beads. Oh, the confidence. I'd put them right in front of my door and be like, don't come in. Okay, maybe. No. Mid-2000 BC, guy glazes up some beads like a wizard. What an icon. And now we have bead doors and bead necklaces. Now we have guys wearing shell necklaces too. A little different, but worth a mention. They're a little odd, those ones.
Number 10, Greek fire. You know what's scary? Fire. You know what's even scarier than that? Someone who can shoot streams of fire at you. While some people love the smell of napalm in the morning, they are usually the people doing the firing. And it wasn't just shirtless Americans who did the firing, no. Somehow, the ancient Greeks also used a proto-napalm that would be used against other ships in naval warfare. The substance would apparently cling to flesh and was impossible to extinguish with water. What puzzles us is that the recipe for Greek fire was never told to anyone. It was a secret on the same level as the Krabby Patty secret formula. People have experimented with different ingredients that the Byzantine Empire had access to. The Mythbusters, my favorite scientists, used naphtha, which is made from a light crude oil, mixed with pine resin, and they burned down a ship in a few seconds. I'm sure at the time, people thought that those who used Greek fire were wielding the power of a god or something. Number 9, Damascus Steel. While off on the Crusades, a lot of Europeans came into contact with things they'd never seen before. Spices, for example. Please cut it with the bland food, guys, please. Another thing they saw were warriors who wielded blades that could slice through floating handkerchiefs but also bend to ridiculous degrees without breaking. These blades were made from what was called Damascus Steel. But for some reason, we actually have no idea what these blades were actually made of, or what the process for making it could even be. Some people think it could have been made by mixing iron with plant matter, which could have given the kind of flexibility I'll never have. But we don't know what plant matter, and we don't even know for sure that's how it was done. Best guess is that it was made of crucible steel, which, can I just say, sounds really cool. But that's just a theory. Wait, that's the wrong channel. Number 8, the Voynich Manuscript. This may be a little bit insensitive of me, but the drawings in the Voynich Manuscript kind of look like the same things I used to doodle in my notebooks when I stopped paying attention in class. I definitely never wrote like that though. The Voynich Manuscript is named after Wilfrid Voynich. who was a Polish collector and bookseller in 1912 when he acquired the manuscript. It's from around the 15th century and is written in this really cool looking code with strange drawings. The font actually kind of reminds me of the font from Lord of the Rings. Does anyone else see that, or am I weird? A lot of the pictures drawn in the book seem to be plants. But then you get the random page that has a string of what looks like pregnant women and you're back to square one. I don't know, but I'm still going with somebody's encrypted notebook with fun doodles for when they're bored. Number 7. Ulfbert Swords. How do you make a sword that your society did not have the technology for? That is an excellent question, and it is the question that Viking Ulfbert swords pose to historians. The problem with Ulfbert swords is that the technology required for making them did not appear until about 800 years later. Now the thing that kind of bothers me with that assumption is we are assuming that it didn't appear until 800 years later because we haven't found evidence to prove otherwise, except for the swords themselves. In Viking society, a lot of stuff was made with wood and other degradable things, which makes it really hard to know too much about the ancient peoples. What's really interesting is how a Viking sword bearing an Arabic inscription was found. Perhaps these swords were made with Damascus steel, the recipe for which was given to the Vikings through trade, maybe? We need more evidence to know for sure. Number 6. Baghdad Battery. Do you know how a battery works? Allow me to explain. I don't really know. What I do know is that it involves chemistry. Google tells me the chemical reactions in a battery involve the flow of electrons from one material to another through an external circuit. I don't know. We often think of batteries as a moderately modern invention, and for the most part that's true. But then there's the Baghdad Battery. The Baghdad Battery, or batteries because there were a bunch of them, were discovered outside modern-day Baghdad in Iraq in 1936. And it's basically a clay pot with a copper cylinder inside of it. Inside the copper cylinder was an iron rod held in place with asphalt. Now, if you take an electrolyte liquid like even grape juice or something, and put it in the pots now become batteries, generating about 2 volts of electricity. The crazy thing about this is that they were found in a Paleolithic village, which is like the Stone Age. We have absolutely no idea what the electricity was used for, but probably because it's fun to administer minor electrical shocks to yourself, right? Number 5. Iron Pillar. The Iron Pillar of Delhi is, well, it's pretty self-explanatory actually. It's an iron pillar, which is more than 1,600 years old. I leave my bike out in the rain for like 3 days and it's a rusty pile of junk. But this thing has been out in the open for all those years and it never gained a single speck of rust. How the heck is that possible? I don't know. None of us actually know. Some people think it might have to do with the climate in Delhi, as if it was just in the perfect spot to not rust. But then others think it has to do with the phosphorus and absence of sulfur and manganese in the iron, plus its size. I don't know, my pea-sized brain won't be able to tell you the answer, but it certainly is a puzzling one. Number 4. Chinese seismoscope. At first glance, I can confidently say that I would not assume this was the seismoscope. It was basically a big old pot with a bunch of dragons around the outside that would symbolize each direction on a compass. And when an earthquake would happen, the dragon that represented the direction the quake came from would spit out a ball into a bronze toad's mouth. Now, apart from bronze dragons spitting balls into bronze frog mouths, this is an extremely sophisticated device, and absolutely no one knows how it works. We have guesses about what could do it, but this thing can detect the direction of earthquakes 400 miles away. That's insane. And they still made it into a work of art. I am impressed. Good show. Good show. Number 3. Antothera Mechanism. I kinda hate when people think complex things in history had to be because of aliens. Just because these people were ancient does not mean that they were stupid. They just didn't have the vast amounts of shared knowledge we have now. Then you show me the Antothera Mechanism and all I can think is aliens. This thing was probably built around the 2nd century BC, and it had the capability of calculating and displaying things like the phases of the moon and the lunisolar calendar, which is just crazy. We know that people did study that, and gear-based tech like this had actually been a thing for a long time before it. We think of computers as modern things, but there were machines capable of doing calculations before electricity and computer chips. Some of us have to start giving these ancient civilizations more credit instead of just jumping to aliens or to time travel. Number 2. Roman Dodecahedron. 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 Oh, what? Oh yeah, sorry, I got a video to make. Here, look at this thing. This is a Roman dodecahedron, and guess what? We have absolutely no idea what it's supposed to do. But we do know that Europe has tons of these, and they all date back to the Roman era. Like all dodecahedra, it has 12 sides, and each side has a differently sized hole. They also have strange bulbs on each corner. They would range in sizes too, being anywhere from 4 to 11 centimeters. I'm honestly stumped about what it could be. People have theorized they could be paperweights, toys, candle holders, dice, or even a thing used to measure finger sizes for rings. Let me know what you think it could be. Number 1. Easter Island. If you thought this point was going to be about the huge statues on the island, well, think again. While those statues are a mystery all on their own, this point is actually going to be about Rongo Rongo. What the heck is Rongo Rongo? Well, Rongo Rongo is possibly a form of ancient writing. What makes it stand apart is that it is almost nothing like any other form of writing from any other culture in the world, at least that we know of. Look at this really handy dandy rock that's covered in the writing. Can you make anything out of it? Apparently, the symbols are based on Polynesian religious motifs. My brain is just a smidge too slow to get any kind of information out of it. It just makes me really wish I had a secret language, you know?
Starting our list off at number 10, VR. Okay, I recently got an Oculus and I felt sick a lot. I was so dizzy right off the bat. The game's super hot where you have to like throw items at bad guys. I actually got anxious. My palms were sweaty, my heart was racing. Olivia straight up cried when she tried it. It was a wild ride. This is pretty powerful technology. Black Mirror, of course, has toyed with how VR could go wrong, but The Simpsons also predicted its dangers all the way back in 2016. The episode titled Friends and Family has the town of Springfield excited over this new VR tech that's finally arrived. They're so into it that eventually people are walking in the streets while wearing these headsets. They're bumping into walls, they're smacking their heads, they're ignoring real life obligations. Cut to now with Facebook going the virtual route recently with the introduction of the metaverse. I believe The Simpsons actually undermined the dangers for this one. Yeah, you thought pop-ups and sketchy links were bad for your family on Facebook? I don't know, soon we're gonna be walking into virtual pop-ups. That's gonna be pretty alarming. $3 billion worth of VR was sold during the pandemic alone. Connecting during times like such can be vital, but how far is too far? Which room am I in? I'm in the laundry room like sword fighting someone. I'm like, what am I doing right now? Number 9. Drones. I mean, sure, drones can deliver packages now in like 13 minutes flat, and sure, they can fly through bowling lanes in cinematic fashion, but could drones be so advanced that we're actually mistaking them for alien aircraft? Possibly. We don't know how advanced these things are. We have no idea, not even the military. Back in the early 60s, the CIA had this secret program called Project Aqualine, where they used these small drones with a low radar cross-section, a little camera, all that spy stuff, and it was disguised as a bird, believe it or not. The first prototype was a bit obvious. It weighed over 100 pounds, it was this massive eagle-looking thing, but the only way to catch the drone was to fly it into a net, which broke something almost every single flight. Cut to 2022, it looks a little bit differently. Now there's like a bird conspiracy, people don't even believe birds are real, and there's for sure a drone pigeon out there somewhere. Number 8, 3D printing. This is something that did not exist when I was younger at all, in any way, shape, or form. All we had were those spider markers that like connect the dots that are like kind of sticky. That was it, that's the closest we had to 3D printing. Now people are printing swords in their basement, I don't know. Connor on our gaming channel, he printed a Pokeball and it looks awesome. It's a real size Pokeball. Now he has one of those because he printed it. It's becoming increasingly popular as they're becoming more accessible. Unlike the traditional printer, 3D printers are able to print and create these three-dimensional objects on the spot. It's fascinating how fast it works. This technology is continuing to advance, and some printers now have capabilities of printing out food and even organs. So that's great, but again, where is this all going? How far are we gonna go? Sounds like it's a kind of a bad idea. It feels good, but so does everybody in the first 20 minutes of a Black Mirror episode. Know what I mean? Like, oh, this technology is fascinating. Then they're like stuck in some virtual matrix for 40 years. Number 7, smart TVs. Survivor season 42, episode 5. That's it. That's how easy it is right now. That's where we're at with technology. Remember TV guides? That's gone. Ask your parents about TV guides. Just watch the trauma return in their eyes when you ask them that one. I didn't know this was something that people were worried about until I looked into it. I love my smart TV. It's got all the apps. I can speak into the microphone instead of using the terrible Prime search function. I don't need cable as well. It solves so many problems and the picture is great, but not everybody feels so on board with these smart TVs. Apparently smart TVs are so smart now that they're also keeping tabs on users' viewing habits, which viewers are worried will somehow allow criminals to hack in and then steal their personal information, which more than fair. This is a new technology. I have no idea how to do it. My dad has no idea how to use smart TVs. Oh my god, that's a nightmare all the time. There might be something that I'm missing, but do I want to find out? No, I don't know. Imagine someone hacking your TV in the middle of the night. Anonymous just appears. That'd be so haunting. I would not want to get out of bed. Number 6, self-driving cars. If you own a Tesla, first of all, nice. Bravo, must be nice, that's great. But comment down below how often you actually use the self-driving feature. I imagine that it's terrifying. I don't know if I could ever use that. Just click it and just, okay, hope it works. I watched this body cam footage the other day online of someone being pulled over in a self-driving car because they were asleep at the wheel. They were asleep, but they were driving, well the car was driving, but they were having a nap. They were on their way to work asleep, you know what I mean? This is where the line gets kind of hazy. Do we want this technology to go further? I don't know. I kind of want people awake on the road. Call me old school. I mean, there are plenty of reasons why this feature makes sense, why it could be exceptionally helpful, and why, you know, there are people who are clearly on board with the idea, but there are also some things that are rightfully a major cause for concern. One of the most debated and truly one of the biggest questions surrounding this is an ethical one, like, will a self-driving car prioritize its driver over other road users in any given situation? Know what I mean? Something happens, who's it gonna prioritize? Someone you're about to hit, it's gonna prioritize you. How do we make those real life decisions? We don't. Well, we do, but computers, they don't. Number 5, Google Glass. Smart eyewear technology, that's cool. You want to feel like Tony Stark? Sure, I get the idea. Ideally, when it's worked out, this pair of shades can make you a little bit of a superhero, okay? It's able to display information and content in a similar way that a smartphone would, only, you know, hands-free. It would be only voice control, wearing a heads-up display like Google Glass or even a modified version of VR. Now or later, I don't know if I'm on board, to be honest with you. These can contribute to eye fatigue and may cause visual confusion. And also, this may mess with your memories, scientists say. You'll get a pop-up in the middle of your kid's first birthday and your whole memory is just ruined forever, you know what I mean? I don't want that. I don't want a computer or notifications anywhere around me. My phone's bad enough, let alone Google Glass. Middle of a conversation, a really dirty pop-up comes up, you're getting coffee with your parents, you're like, close, please. Number 4, robots. Oh god, here we go. We're at a point now where robots can straight up do parkour. Boston Dynamics is trending every other week. Half the time I can't tell if their videos are real or fake. These robots are just too impressive. Sophia the robot. Yeah, she's been on talk shows. She's a fun time. Let's talk about her for a bit. Sophia the robot is the first robot to ever receive citizenship from a country. Can you believe that? She's legally from Saudi Arabia. Sophia is a citizen, and this robot citizen was on talk shows saying how she wants to destroy humans. And then everybody around on the talk show laughed and went along with the bit. Could this slowly be underway? Is this a marketing ploy? I don't know. Either way, I don't like when robots say again, hey, call me old school. I don't like when robots do shit. Number 3, flying cars. Where we're going, we still need roads. Ideally, Marty, let's do it. Even scarier than self-driving cars. Cars that fly. I never want this, personally. I can't even parallel park now, let alone in the air. Know what I mean? This idea started to get real back in 2017. You may have seen it online. The concept of a futuristic hover car was revealed officially. It was called the Renault Float Car, and it wasn't as cool as we thought, but it's a step, definitely a step forward. There's numerous companies working on a floating car right now, and to be honest, by 2024, we could actually see these things on the road. So heads up or forward. I don't know. Just stay awake on the road. Just drive, please. Number 2, mood rings. Okay, for these last 2, we're gonna jazz it up a little bit. I'm gonna pick 2 inventions that thought they changed the game, but really, they didn't at all. This 70s invention was a real gem. Pun, we got it. The mood ring, as far as fads go, not the best, not the worst. It's nothing like our number 1 spot, but it's quite close. The stone that would change its appearance due to your body heat. That was the, the magic of it. But some folk actually let this ring make decisions for them in real life. The mood ring was the bee's knees all around town. Joshua Reynolds and Maurice Ambatz created them in 1975. They added some love, or some lies rather, to the mix, and now we got a popular fad. Yellow meant that you were nervous. Blue meant that you were relaxed. And red obviously meant that you were mad, right? Of course, take your ring back and your $8. They sold 40 million rings in just a few months alone, making around $20 million in sales. All for a ring that just likes your body heat. My mood ring says that I'm angry after hearing that fact. So let's move on. Finally, number 1. Silly bands. Oh boy, where do I even start with these ones? I remember taking part of this craze when I was in high school. I had like 11 of these all wrapped around. Zero circulation, but you know what? I was cool. They were literally just rubber bands that made a silly shape. And most of the time, the shapes weren't even that silly. It would just be an anchor or a hammer. That's not silly at all. The same team that made the Live Strong bracelets were responsible for silly bands, and by 2010, thousands of stores were selling them. It was hot. You couldn't even buy these things, honestly. They were sold out, I remember. I was part of the mob trying to get those silly bananas. Classrooms had to ban these because they were too distracting. How embarrassing is that? The iPad came out in 2010, yet they had to ban silly bands in the classroom. We love it. Silly bands made over 100 million a year. I'd say it's worth it for that guy. The guy's swimming inside of his house now because we wanted the $ shape wrapped around our wrist for some reason. So you know what? He got us. Eat the rich. I'm like, yeah, eat the rich, but stop buying silly bands at the same time. Know what I mean?
Number 10. Party favors in the sky. When you think of air travel today, you think of lots of space for you and your fellow passengers, meals that are flavorful and affordable. Air travel in 2021 is a stress-free, very organized way to travel. But in the 1700s, these luxuries of the sky were non-existent, as there was no air travel. Any international travel was done by ship, which took months at a time and was not a pleasurable experience, opposite to what was described above. Two French brothers wanted to change this, or rather just get off the ground. The two French brothers, Montgolfier, developed and flew the first unmanned hot air balloon on September 19, 1783. This was shortly followed up with a manned flight by Jean-Francois Pilote de Rosier. This was a very strange invention at the time, as this was really the beginning of humans and flight. Number 9. The National Razor. What's a revolution without a little blood being spilt? Wouldn't really be a revolution, would it? France was having a hard time in the 1700s, so they needed a brand new way to get rid of pesky monarchs and anyone who isn't warming up to the revolutionary ideals. And what better way to keep people warm by cleaving their heads from their body? A man named Joseph Ignace Guillotine suggested that there was a better method for unaliving those who needed to be unalived. A common misconception is that he invented the guillotine, but rather suggested its implementation, where his name would become synonymous with such a terrible device. Basically, you got a wood frame with a hole for your noggin and a large angled blade. Blade drops down from frame and removes the head of state from the governing body, which isn't just a clever joke, as that's what happened to the last king and queen of France. By the time of its invention and the end of its use all the way up into the 1970s, yes, that's right, it was used up until the 70s, thousands of people met their doom to the National Razor. Number 8. Puckle needs his gat. Ever since black powder first made it to Europe and Europeans figured out you could make big gun that go boom, people have been trying to come up with better and faster ways to make gun go boom. In the 1700s, the biggest issue with muskets and cannons at the time was reloading, or getting multiple shots off. Loading black powder weapons isn't easy. I'd say ask a pirate, but you can't. Those kind of pirates are all gone now. So to fix the issue of the day, a man named James Puckle invented the very cleverly named Paco Gun. Basically, he just added more chambers of shot rotating around one barrel. Although his idea for the time was genius, in practice it wasn't very effective, as flintlock and black powder are really the main issue. Clumsy, lots of smoke, and does not want to work in less than fair weather conditions. Number 7. Cotton Eye Joe. Dear YouTube gods, I am sorry that history is full of not so cool things, but here at Bumblebee, I'm the queen bee, and I'm here to give the buzz to my sweet honeybees. So in the name of good morals, monetization, and not getting smited, I'm gonna talk about your least favorite S word. Back in the 1700s, America was chillin'. They just beat Britain in a war, which alone could be its own video. They were starting to build their own country, particularly in the southern colonies using forced unpaid labor that you can't leave. Oh, and your boss can do heinous things to you because he owns you. Their economy was agricultural based and stayed that way for a long time. Tobacco being the #1 crop at first, cotton was still grown but wasn't as popular due to the processing of cotton being a very labor intensive and difficult process. This was until Eli Whitney's cotton gin, invented in 1794. The cotton gin was a machine that quickly removed seeds and processed cotton, making cotton a very valuable crop since, you know, the people harvesting the cotton are YouTube's least favorite S word. It's a brutal unpaid workforce. Now that it was profitable, cotton boomed and the South became very wealthy. While not exactly the main reason, the South getting rich off Whitney's design and did somewhat create a divide between the southern states and the northern states, eventually leading to the Civil War. Also, apparently plantation owners didn't pay Eli for his machine and he went broke. Just trashy behavior all around, man, come on. Number 6. Yes, I'm a Russian submarine commander. I actually couldn't believe this one myself, but the submarine was invented in the 1700s. Having designs and plans started in the 1500s, the first real use of a submersible vessel wasn't until 1775, named the Turtle, an acorn-shaped vessel with a crew of just 1. To me, it's just hard to think that in the same century we were beginning to master flight and sea travel. I also can't stop thinking that if there was a water ride that existed, it would be pretty cool if you went underwater in like a pod, like a submarine kind of thing. Just an idea for the mouse and the corporation. Of course, it wouldn't be years until after the Turtle that the submarine would see effective use. Or have a Scottish man play a Russian submarine commander in a really good movie. Russian submarine commander. Number 5. Dawn of the punch card. With the Industrial Revolution on the horizon, many things were about to change. Probably the most obvious at the time was factories. While not the first, Richard Arkwright's Cromford Mill in 1771 is what most resembles a modern factory today. Cromford Mill was the first water-powered cotton spinning mill and initially employed 200 workers. It ran day and night with 2 12-hour work shifts, the gates being locked at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., permitting no late arrivals. Oh, he likes to keep a tight schedule. Yeah, I can see the beginnings of a modern factory, alright. All you're missing is Bezos and a couple of drones to make it modern. All jokes aside though, these early factories changed the very fabric of not only Britain, but also the world. I mean, where would we be today with all that lovely pollution and those great and fair working conditions? I bet there was benefits too. Number 4. The golden liquid. You drink liquid and then it's gonna come out of you. It's simple, it's science. But sometimes other fluids need to be drained. Sometimes you can have difficulty using the little boys' room. Personally, I'm still learning how to put down the toilet seat. I haven't quite figured that one out. How to make pee when a person cannot pee, portly founding father Benjamin Franklin thought to himself as he was holding a kite in the rain. This is something I learned, which I didn't know, is that he invented the flexible catheter. Yep. Next time you feel a little weird because a tube is being inserted into a sensitive area, you can thank the man on the $100 bill. Invented in 1752 in order to aid his brother with bladder stones. It's strange though, you know, you think of a guy inventing other things, but in reality, it's a really important invention and something that's very common in the medical world today. I just hope to stay healthy long enough so no tube has to go near my founding father. Number 3. Pseudocool. Okay, so back in the 1700s, food was really hard to keep. For example, meat is packed with a salty brine in order to preserve it. It either has to be shipped overseas or last long enough through a cold and brutal winter. But plans for refrigeration were being drawn up, specifically the idea of vapor compression refrigeration. Not exactly the fridge that's in your kitchen today, considering there's, you know, still no main harnessing of electricity, which makes fridges run, but a brilliant idea nonetheless. While the fridge we know was still far away, it's crazy to think in the 1700s we had serious plans for one. While this was being developed, food was kept near lakes and snows in the winter. Runoffs from mountains were often used to keep drinks cool. I think this is something we all take for granted. I mean, can you imagine drinking room temperature milk or having a beef dinner that tastes saltier than salt? Looking back through history, it's interesting to see how humans persevere. As much as I love food, I don't know if I could stomach food from the past. Thank goodness we don't eat anything gross today. Hey man, do you have any canned cheese left? I'm kinda hungry. Number 2. Ebony, ivory, living together in harmony. I honestly thought this one was older than the 1700s, but hey, here we are, invented in the year 1700 by a musically inclined Italian gentleman named Bartolomeo Cristofori. Unhappy with what was going on at the time, he decided to spice it up by changing out a few parts of some common instruments, and started using little hammers that strike quickly on chords and come back in hopes they would not dampen the sound. A little fine tuning here and there, and bada bing bada boom, you got a piano. I would attempt to make a joke about the piano, but let's be honest, no piano, no Elton John. No jazz, No Frank Sinatra. If you're asking me, that's a big problem. Number 1. ABCs. As someone who struggles with reading, this one makes me want to hide under my covers at night. I spent countless hours as a kid learning to read, and oh man, the phonics lessons were brutal. And thanks to this invention, I can blame it all on the 1755 invention, the English Dictionary. Yep, that's right. One of the most influential too. Written by Samuel Johnson, it took 7 years to compile all the words I can't pronounce. He was commissioned 1,500 guineas for the project, which is worth about £250,000 today. Until the completion of the Oxford Dictionary 173 years later, Johnson's dictionary is considered to be the preeminent English dictionary and a huge achievement in scholarship. I mean, you gotta give the guy credit for writing this. Imagine writing an English essay for 7 years. But then again, £250,000 for some of my writing also sounds pretty good. All I have to do now is learn to read and write. Number 10. The bullet mousetrap. You might have heard me say that and said, what? Which is exactly what I said when I saw a mousetrap that's main killing potential was to fire a lead slug Minuteman style at a small rodent. It is no exaggeration to say that the difference between this mousetrap and a musket is that a musket weighs a little bit more. The mousetrap was loaded just like a traditional musket of the time, with black powder, a lead ball, and even a percussion cap. In all honesty, I'm not sure how you go about defending this mousetrap. Textbook definition of overkill. Also, you know, there's a loaded firearm in the house with a hair trigger that a small rodent could set off by gently grazing it. I like to imagine a fun family game of, do I no longer have a sister or was that just a mouse, after hearing a small musket fire inside the home. I also had to mention that while the immediate danger of a .32 caliber lead ball finding a new home in your stomach is frightening enough, black powder being black powder is very volatile and produces a lot of energy. Fire hazard. Smokey the fire safety dog does not approve. Number 9. Tea for men. Winding the clock back to the 1800s, you'll find pictures of distinguished ladies and gentlemen. And these distinguished gentlemen have the fullest and thickest mustaches ever grown by man. Much care is needed to maintain such a manly image. So when an established gentleman goes for his morning tea, it would be rather unfortunate to get his mustache wet and ruin his dashing good looks. An invention of the 1800s beckons to solve this issue with the mustache cup. Mustache cups were invented so the chivalrous men of the day didn't ruin their grooming rituals with a cup of Earl Grey tea. The cups had a small porcelain mouthpiece with a smaller hole for drinking, while the main piece would protect the stash. It may sound ridiculous, but it almost looks like a modern travel mug. So maybe they were onto something. Number 8. Nightmare story. I don't know about you guys, but no matter how you present them, dolls are just creepy. Have you ever noticed that when someone has a creepy doll, it's never just one? There's always a bunch of them for some reason. I don't know, I wouldn't want the room to feel safe or welcoming after all. One man in 1871 said, I know, let's make them even creepier by having them move themselves. The creeping doll, as it was called, was a doll-like automaton that had clock-like gears to simulate real human movement, with the addition of hidden wheels underneath to aid in the doll moving across the floor. Because, you know, the last thing I need is this doll creeping into my bed at night. Whew. Number 7. Gee, this cane is heavy. As people began to settle down after imperial monarchies went the way of the dodo bird, it was a good idea in everyone's best interest to limit people carrying weapons. If people didn't have swords, it could make another revolution a little less bloody. But what's that I hear from upper class wealthy people who don't want to listen to the rules that they make? Well, how about concealed and hidden swords? Yep, that's right. Cane swords were a popular fashion accessory in the 19th century. As carrying swords fell out of fashion, royal men needed to take swords with them for self-defense, or so they thought. Even women were concealing these hidden bladed inventions in parasols. However, it was socially unacceptable for a woman to have such possessions, let alone have the ability to know such training. As time went on, the hidden compartments that held blades were replaced with my personal favorite item, a flask. Number 6. Look at all these cool chickens. Let's face it, we all went through our awkward phases in life. And if you didn't live through the early 2000s as a youth, then bands like Linkin Park and My Chemical Romance just don't hit as hard. So when trying to find the weirdest inventions of the 1800s, I felt like closing my bedroom door and playing Green Day as I dye my hair because I'm super serious about how I feel. Why do I feel this teenage angst, you ask? Well, that's because there's rose-tinted glasses for chickens. Yeah, and they're cooler than me. Oh, yeah, little tiny eyeglasses for chickens, but they actually have a good use. They were designed to prevent pecking and cannibalizing other chickens. Ooh. The theory goes that if a chicken was wearing rose-tinted glasses, he couldn't distinguish between blood and what wasn't. That way they wouldn't attack each other. Yet another heartwarming comfort from the 1800s. Number 5. I'm coming out of this hole, partner. We enjoy many luxuries in the 21st century. Warm houses, everyday appliances, and the freedom to shout profanities at strangers on the internet you slightly disagree with, but you give them the business anyway because it's been a bad week and you deserve it. But probably what we should all be thankful for is modern medicine. Back in the 1800s, it just wasn't where it is today. A great example of that is safety coffins. A truly grim situation. A medical doctor has declared you dead. Now you are being buried alive. Have no fear, friends, because you had enough money for a safety coffin. The coffin contained a device or means of various designs, which was to alert the living of your mistaken burial and hopeful resurrection. The very rational fear of being buried alive most likely was spun from fiction and news at the time, with the occasional case happening here and there. However, I'm of the opinion it should be a never ever kind of thing. Yeah, no thanks. Number 4. Your bad hair day has just been terminated. Oh, to live in a time of industrial revolution where machines go and go. I'm sure that all this heavy industry won't enable bad practices of corporations and usher in the destruction of our environment. Pfft, no sir! This is the age of machines, and if machines can help with one thing, it most certainly can aid in another. May I introduce you the Rotary hairbrush? Why brush your own hair when an overcomplicated machine can do it for you? At the time, it kinda made sense. Machines felt like they were the way of the future. They were kind of right, but at this rate everything in the home would have intricate pulleys or a steam engine attached. Steampunk anyone? Number 3. Full of air. The Industrial Revolution changed the world, we can't deny that. That can also be said for the steam trains. But what about pneumatic power trains? Back in the 1800s, a man named Alfred Eli Beach came up with such a design. Prior testing had proven useful enough to build a larger demonstration in New York. So he built a tunnel to test his air-powered train. It only ran a short distance, but the train held 22 people and was controlled by a roots blower nicknamed the Western Tornado. That was also my nickname in high school. Sadly, the project didn't receive much support from the government at the time, and other methods for trains eventually took over. Unfortunate, because it sounds like Alfred Eli Beach was very dedicated to the project, as he put up a very large sum of money to the project. The tunnel that housed the short train line was completed in 58 days. While he did have bigger plans for his train, it kinda just became an amusement for people. It was shortly shut down thereafter. But 58 days, that's pretty quick. I'd like to see that happen in a major city now. No way it's happening. Number 2. Get on my mongoose, bro. Looking at the Motor Scout, you can see the beginnings of what could be a 4-wheeler. Personally, I think it looks like a mongoose from Halo, but Mom thinks I play too many games. Designed by F.R. Sims in the late 1890s, it was never really meant for off-road terrain, instead to support infantry on smooth roads. Sims, understanding the annoyance of trying to ride your motorized quad cycle while someone is firing at you, placed a Maxim machine gun on the quad to return fire. Which is strange, because usually these things require a team of soldiers to operate. He also added an iron shield for a little extra protection. It is too bad the next major conflict would have a lack of usable roads and more trenches than anything else. While it never did see combat, it was somewhat useful, and would later inspire Sims to design the first armored car. Number 1. Bro, trust me. Everyone has a favorite article of clothing. For sports fans out there, it could be a lucky jersey, but back in the 1800s, there was an article of clothing no British soldier could be without: the Cholera Belt. What does a Cholera Belt do exactly? Well, it helps to prevent cholera. I've got good sources, bro, trust me. The running not so scientific theory at the time was that any abdominal issues and sickness was caused by a chilly belly. So simply make your tummy warm and voila, cholera has been prevented. British soldiers in India were often given the belts unaware of the biohazard that was an epidemic. The belts were just flannel that basically wrapped around you. It's a good thing we're not superstitious today and would never buy into such ridiculousness. Hey man, did my order of healing crystals come in? I'm getting some bad voodoo vibes at home lately, man. I totally need to cleanse that space, bro. Number 10. Steel cage match, brother. Okay, so it's the early 1900s and you're living in a rapidly growing city. Towers are popping up everywhere, and that means that there's less space for you and your baby to play in. Only if there was a way my baby could get fresh air and sunshine. Meet the baby cage. Yeah, a small metal cage with a tiny mattress for your baby. The said metal cage is suspended on your windowsill, making the baby suspend multiple stories above ground level. This is just a great idea. The idea behind this terrible idea was that the babies need fresh air and sunshine. Providing them with such was thought to improve their immune system and make them healthier. Besides the fact that the only thing separating your baby from becoming the worst rainfall event of the month was a thin metal cage. This is a prime example of why every product should be thoroughly tested and thought about before selling. Eventually, these did fall out of fashion, but in reality this wasn't that long ago, which is kinda crazy to think about. Number 9. I'm ready for my close-up. Ladies, this one's for you. In this day and age with social media, loving your self-image can be tough. There's tons of things that makeup companies and media do to make you want to be the people they want you to be. If you buy said product, of course. Well, I'm here to tell you that you don't need all that. You're gorgeous just the way you are, and lately, honey, you've been slaying it. However, this marketing manipulation isn't new, and in the past, most certainly wasn't very subtle. Introducing the Beauty Micrometer, the latest from How to Horrify People Daily. It was actually invented by the famed beautician Max Factor Sr. Hell of a name. This steel cagey device was placed over a poor woman's head, to then mathematically calculate the flaws that would be adjusted using makeup products. Obviously these are no longer around, and for good reason. I don't even have a joke for that one, that's just weird. Number 8. Nuclear time. A lot happened in the 1900s. I mean, a lot. Couple wars here and there, the TV, the car. It was a busy century. A century full of discovery and invention. One such unusual invention was the radium dial, watches and clocks that were painted with luminescent paint, making the numbers and dials glow in the dark. Trouble with this new invention was the paint being used wasn't exactly safe, as it was made from radium. For the Breaking Bad nerds at home, radium is a highly radioactive element, even more so than the legendary uranium. So when a factory of women eager to get to work were told they were going to be painting watches with radioactive paint, do you think anyone asked for PPE? Truth be told, not everything was known about radium as it was only recently discovered, but what's so unusual is what factories told these women how to paint the watches. In order to give the brushes a fine tip, the women were instructed to use their lips to keep the brushes in perfect order, not knowing that day after day they were ingesting a very radioactive element. And in some sense of dark comedy, they sometimes had fun and painted their nails and on each other. I mean, it glowed in the dark, it was glow in the dark paint, it was new, it was cool. Over 50 women would become very sick from painting, and 12 sadly lost their lives. Number 7. Back to the future. During the technological boom of electronics in the 1980s, there was one invention I think is really unusual. Computers, camcorders, and even home video game consoles were becoming commonplace all over the world. People who are familiar with retro Nintendo consoles are familiar with the likes of Super Mario Bros., The Legend of Zelda, or Contra. You may even remember a certain gaming accessory involving a laughing dog every time you miss a duck. What 80s kids might not remember is the Konami Laser Scope. Similar to Nintendo's Zapper, but with two key differences. 1, it's a headset instead of a pistol. 2, it's voice controlled, meaning when you come across enemies in game, you have to shout fire to fire in game. The Konami Laser Scope was bold and tried to be ahead of its time, but when taking a good look at it, 1, it makes the user just look ridiculous, and 2, it doesn't work. Reviews for the headset are not favorable and just defeat the purpose of using a headset. Today we have VR headsets that may seem just as ridiculous, but they work, and the use of voice still isn't a primary control used in games today. Number 6. Battleship Woodship. This is one of my favorites. Okay, hear me out for this one. Back in the 1940s, there was a really super not very fun expensive war happening. Germany, Japan, and Italy needed to go into the timeout corner. But after a while of people trying to put each other in the timeout corner, things were getting super expensive. World War II was fought on all fronts, land, sea, and air. The sea being a key part to the war victory in the beginning of the war. Literally tons of war goods and ships were being sunk by German U-boats every day across the Atlantic. So, in order to cut costs, what if the ships were built out of something cheaper, but just as tough as steel? Concrete, right? Nope, I bet you weren't thinking ice. Or more specifically, sawdust and ice mixed to form pykrete. Testing with pykrete had gone so well that in a super secret general meeting, pykrete was presented, shot at in the meeting, ricocheting a bullet causing another general a flesh wound. Having its defense capabilities proven in the war room, Operation Habakkuk was greenlit, and the Allies were planning on constructing an aircraft carrier made out of ice and sawdust to help thwart the German U-boats. However, this was scrapped, as a boat made of sawdust and ice would really not be much help against a German U-boat. Plus, where do you sleep? Can you cook on there? Way more questions than answers. Number 5. Hello there. Channeling our inner General Grievous, our number 5 spot belongs to the Monowheel. Originally designed in the 19th century, it wasn't until the 20th century they slapped a motor on one of these bad boys and did their best escape attempt from Utapau. Sorry, I'm a Star Wars guy. It just looks like the vehicle from the third movie, I can't help myself. In reality, the monocycle is a single-wheeled motorized vehicle where the driver either sits inside the wheel housing or right beside it. Today these vehicles are still around but really only used for entertainment purposes, as the design does have a few issues. One wheel gives balance issues, there's a visibility issue since, well, you know, you're usually sitting inside the wheel, and an issue called gerbling, which basically means if the driver brakes too hard, the inner ring will overcome its own gravity and the driver will do a full loop, similar to how a gerbil spins around on its wheel. Seeing that would make Monday morning traffic a lot more amusing though, I gotta say. Number 4. Deep breath, my equine friend. World War I was the war to end all wars, except for the 10 major wars that came after it. Noted for being the bloodiest and most destructive conflict at the time, it gave humanity a bunch of cool and exciting inventions, so long as they were not being used on you. One of the worst things to come out of the First World War was the extensive use of trench warfare and chemical weapons, or more specifically chlorine gas. Trench warfare was brutal, not only in its barbaric over-the-top charges into machine gun fire, but also in its living. Trenches had terrible living conditions, and were difficult to take from the enemy. Crossing no man's land was no joke. So, to eliminate the pesky enemies entrenched in their trenches, the very cruel chlorine gas was used, causing nausea, violent coughing, chest pain, and corneal burns, just about everything you'd find on the back of normal medication, right? Gas masks helped when they were available, but unfortunately they were not the only living creatures on the battlefield. This is where our invention comes in. The very depressing invention of the horse gas mask. The idea is the same. Horses need protection too, and since World War I was still a war powered by horses, it was more common than you might think, and a lot of our equine friends perished alongside us. Number 3. Wilson! Some of you may have been cool enough back in 1975 to own a pet rock. Some of you may have not. Looking back, it doesn't really make any sense. Sure, everyone needs something to keep them company. Tom Hanks would have never gotten off the island he was stranded on if it wasn't for Wilson. Imagine a world without Tom Hanks. I, for one, would not want to live in such a world. All jokes aside, the pet rock was a genius marketing campaign, very similar to the fidget spinner of recent years. It's proof that if you can get a fad trade rolling, you can sell anything. Now who wants some of my bathwater? Number 2. Chef's Kiss. Okay, it's 1958. Times are good. Cars have cool fins on them. Elvis is on the radio, and most of my post-traumatic stress disorder has cleared up since the war was over. It's all great. Ah, yes, life is good. I can't wait to enjoy some modern cuisine. Well, let's see what's on the menu. I'll have to start with the frozen cheese salad. I'll have ham and banana hollandaise. And for dessert, I'll have the lime jello tuna pie. If that doesn't sound appetizing, I don't know what does. For some reason, halfway through the century, people just lost their taste buds. They were coming up with all kinds of disgusting foods. A lot of them are in low form for some strange reason. I think the grossest item that you can come across is a little invention called hongar. Sounds like somebody from Skyrim, but nay good sir. Hongar is a mixture of honey and apple cider vinegar. It was thought to provide great health benefits. The only thing that would give me is a spot in front of the toilet refunding my breakfast. Number 1. Krümellauf. Germany was having a really hard time in World War II. The United States, Canada, Britain, Australia, France, and Russia too were all coming to give the mustache man a piece of their mind. Heavily outnumbered, it was time for a miracle. Time to see what top German scientists had up their sleeve. We have a rifle that can shoot around the corners. Isn't it wunderbar? Yeah, this thing is real. A curved barrel called a Krümellauf, used for shooting around tight spaces like corners and out of tank hatches. During the waning years of the war, Germany was coming up with all kinds of crazy inventions to turn the tide. But a rifle that can shoot around corners probably isn't the answer. As mentioned above, the world was coming, and they needed a lot more than a fancy pants rifle to stop the Allies. History tells us that this invention did not work, as Mustache Man is no more.